Riding high into the bye. So let's talk Broncos.
What do you want to do?
I don't know. What do you want to do? I know. Let's talk Broncos. What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new edition of Bronco Talk, where we talk Denver Broncos football. In today's episode, we'll look at a couple bye-week storylines that have caught my eye. But before we do that, do me a huge favor and like this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and throw a comment in this video. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm to reach more of Broncos country. Now, what I'm seeing in the bye week is a lot of talk about Vance Joseph and the potential head coaching positions that he could get. One source is saying that Tennessee is going to be really interested in bringing Vance Joseph in. And kudos to Vance Joseph. He's really turned around our defense from where it was against Miami a couple of years ago, where he was trying to mix the Ejiro Evero defense and his scheme, and he just scrapped all of that and went back to what he knows and loves, and it's worked out ever since. And kudos for Vance Joseph to take on a defensive coordinator role with a team that he had previously and not so distant past had failed as their head coach. So thank you, Vance Joseph, for coming in, for righting the ship, making things right. It didn't start off obviously too hot, but we appreciate Vance Joseph over here at Bronco Talk, so much so that I'm really hoping that Denver does everything that they can do to actually give Vance Joseph a pay raise, whatever incentives he might take to stay in Denver. And I mention that as a possibility because I'm selfish, and as Broncos country, I'm sure we're all selfish and want to see this defense continue to wreak havoc over the AFC West, over the conference, and the whole NFL. I mean, it's the defense travels, goes into Philly, and holds its own. Holds its own at home against Kansas City, regardless of where we're playing or who we're playing. The defense travels, and a lot of that is credit to Vance Joseph. Now, it is not unheard of, obviously, for a defensive coordinator to know and enjoy his role within a team. You've seen in recent history Wade Phillips, who had been a head coach for the Broncos in the late 80s. He was a head coach for the Dallas Cowboys, but really embraced his role as a defensive coordinator. He hasn't pursued many head coaching gigs. And in Denver, he was the reason, one of the main reasons why we were able to win Super Bowl 50. You look at Vic Fangio. He went a long time before he got a head coaching gig. Denver gave him a head coaching gig. It didn't work out. He's doing just fine as a defensive coordinator and enjoys his role. Steve Spagnuolo. You look at Steve Spagnuolo. He's the defensive coordinator for the Chiefs, previously held head coaching positions, but the Kansas City Chiefs are successful as a whole because they've got a head coach, defensive coordinator who's doing everything that he can to prepare the defense and provide that expert level of strategy, scheming, and getting the defense ready as if he was the head coach, but in the defensive coordinator role. In history, you can look at defensive coordinators that knew their role. Dick LeBeau was a longtime Pittsburgh Steelers defensive coordinator, and he, like Vic Fangio, he was a head coach for a couple of years, like Vance Joseph, head coach for a couple of years, but really where his bread and butter was to call the defense. You don't have to run the whole team, and Denver obviously would have to come with a paycheck for Vance Joseph, but I'm hoping that we do whatever we can to retain Vance Joseph. I do think eventually he'll take an open position, but I'm hoping it's kind of like, if you're familiar with George Payton, before he became the general manager of the Denver Broncos, he was an assistant general manager in Minnesota for like 17 years. So just because your name is the hot one on the hiring cycle doesn't necessarily mean that you should take a job or you will take a job. So if we can keep, especially Vance Joseph, especially with the pieces that we have in play. We've got Cooper locked down. We've got Benito locked down. We've got Zach Allen locked down. We've got PS2 locked down. We've got a lot of the guys. Obviously, there's going to be some pieces that there's John Franklin Myers and Alex Singleton come to mind as potential pieces that won't be here long term. But with the Russell Wilson dead cap ending after this season, who knows? Who really knows where we'll go as far as extending guys or who we bring in? Drake Greenlaw's here. He's making an impact, and I fully expect him to be a focal point of the defense going forward. So having that core of defensive players, and then if we're able to retain Vance Joseph, I think that sets the table for a long run as a top flight defense, but a top flight team making noise in the AFC each and every year. So I'm not stoked that his name is getting a lot of buzz out there, throwing out teams even that Tennessee's looking at him. So selfishly seeing that storyline this week, I'm looking at ways and maybe trying to let my own self down a little bit easy that Vance Joseph might stay. I know that he went to college in Boulder. He was a CU buff. He was the head coach for the Denver Broncos. He came back as a DC, so maybe he's comfortable in Colorado. There's a lot of reasons why a DC might stay a DC and not pursue future opportunities as a head coach, or at least enjoy their role while they're being successful in that role for a number of years. Another storyline that I'm keeping an eye on is the running back spot. I did expect Denver to maybe work out a guy or even just entertain the idea of bringing someone in. Initially, before the news broke yesterday, my guy would have been Joshua Kelly, and I still think Joshua Kelly is a good option. He's a free agent, and he has a similar running style to J.K. Dobbins, so I kind of, that was my pairing. A lot of people might look at Jamal Williams as an option, and he's popular. He's a good back, but he's towards the latter stages of his career. He's not a young buck anymore. Definitely serviceable, but I think in the Denver Broncos scheme, and also trying to have a bigger body that runs tough and with patience, I think that Joshua Kelly fit that mold. But then yesterday, Dameon Pierce got waived by the Houston Texans, and a lot of Broncos country, a lot of guys like me, see him get waived and crossing our fingers. Maybe he makes it down to the Denver Broncos on the waiver wire, pretty low priority. And then he didn't get claimed, so he's pretty much just a free agent at this point. Whoever wants his services can offer him a contract, and he can sign with him, work out, whatever the case. So I'm surprised that Denver hasn't put forth more effort to maybe enhance the running back room with J.K. Dobbins down for the year, unless he is speculating that if we make a run to the Super Bowl that he could potentially make a return for the Super Bowl. I mean, fingers crossed, because our offense through the first 10 weeks with J.K. Dobbins, he's the offensive MVP, if not Bo Nix. So we'll keep an eye on that. Dameon Pierce would be that next guy up as far as who I'm looking at as a potential replacement for J.K. through the rest of the regular season and into the postseason. J.K., I fully expect Denver to prioritize getting him an extension and signing him a little bit longer term, whether it's a 2 or 3 year extension. I don't necessarily see a 5-year extension coming for him, but something where it gives him a little bit more stability than rather than being a rental year after year for just a different team each and every year. I think Denver will give him a little bit of stability, but at least in the interim, I think Joshua Kelly was a good option, but Dameon Pierce seems to be a hot name out there in Broncos country. Hey, shoot me with your thoughts, Broncos country. Do you think Denver should roll the dice on bringing in a veteran back, someone that could potentially add a spark to this team after losing J.K. Dobbins? Or should we just roll with the tandem backfield that we have? Jaleel McLaughlin, I'm a huge fan. I just think sometimes he's a little too aggressive and doesn't let the hole develop, doesn't run with the kind of patience that Joshua Kelly or Dameon Pierce or what we've seen out of J.K. Dobbins this year. Now, the next storyline that I am seeing is a lot of infighting amongst Broncos country. I'm not going to help in that regard because I'm probably in the minority on this, but the Chiefs and the Colts play this Sunday, and obviously the Chiefs are a division rival. Never want to root for a division rival, but sometimes, so you'll see my position on this, you need to. And if it came down to it and the Raiders and Chargers were playing each other and we needed the Raiders to beat the Chargers or the Raiders to beat the Colts or the Raiders to beat any name any team in the AFC for Denver to just squeak in and get in as a 7 seed, then I would be rooting for the Raiders. And in this case, the Broncos are my priority. hating the Chiefs, hating the Raiders, being a Raider hater. I mean, I should have it tattooed on me somewhere. I am a Raider hater, but sometimes it's necessary for the greater good, root for a division rival, because the Indianapolis Colts, due to a bogus, I don't want to blame refs. I'm never a ref blamer because we should overcome those obstacles, but because of a bogus leverage call, it cost us a game against Indy and a game-winning field goal that they did miss. So it's not speculative. If that penalty does not get called, the Indianapolis Colts lose to the Denver Broncos, and we're talking a whole different argument this week. We'd be probably willing to take Indianapolis beating the Chiefs to further the possibility of Kansas City not even making the playoffs. But from my perspective, number one priority is the Denver Broncos, and for the Denver Broncos right now, having the tiebreaker going to Indy, and if this week ends where Indy beats Kansas City, then they would be slotted in the number one seed. Number one priority being the Broncos, number one priority being the number one seed. So I'm in the camp that you root for Kansas City this one time and then hope they drop a couple games, and the way that it shakes out is that Kansas City doesn't make the playoffs. But if we get the one seed, everything else will take care of itself. If Kansas City is the 7 seed and they beat the 2 seed and they visit Denver in the divisional round, I'm not afraid of that. I hope that you're not afraid of that. I don't think Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos players are afraid of that. It is tough to beat the same division opponent 3 times in a year. I mean, I don't know the statistic offhand, but it's really, really tough. So I can completely understand why wanting Kansas City out of the playoffs altogether is comforting to Broncos country. But I am in the camp that you get the number one seed, you get the rest for 1 week, and then you let the other teams slug it out. Let's say the Chiefs play the Colts again. Let's say the Chiefs play the Patriots. If they get in at the 7th seed, if they get in at the 6th seed, those are going to be tough matchups where they have to go on the road. There's going to be tough matchups where they've already seen the Indianapolis Colts. Can the Colts use this game and learn from that and maybe do us a favor? The Chiefs did us a favor last week. I mean, we took it. We won. It wasn't them dropping one. We did everything we needed to do to win that game. But maybe they could also do us a favor this week, beat Indianapolis, and make our road to the number one seed home field advantage throughout the playoffs, which is giving us a higher and higher percentage of going to the big game after being out of the playoffs for a number of years and back to relevancy as far as the playoffs and participating past the last week of the season last year and making that leap to possibly going to the Super Bowl. I'm not trying to get too ahead of myself, but where it stands right here, the number one seed is the priority. Broncos country, I'm going to be focusing on that game. I'm going to be rooting for the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not shy about it. I'm also going to be rooting for the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals haven't said anything about Joe Burrow coming back. They're kind of keeping those cards close to the vest. But if the Bengals can upset the Patriots, the Chiefs can beat the Colts, then we've got an inside track to the number one seed, home field through the AFC, and maybe a trip to the Super Bowl. Never say never. I'm going to be paying attention to those two things. I'm also going to be watching Red Zone and getting hyped for Sunday night because news came out earlier this week that the Broncos-Commanders game, which looked like a possible flex game, I thought they would, being a Fox team. It's in D.C. They could flex it out for the only other Fox game this week that's on in the late window, Seattle and Minnesota. There's some history with Darnold in Minnesota. But when we're back on Sunday Night Football next week after resting up on the bye, the NFL has decided that Denver's too good to put on the late window on Sunday. They want us in the prime time window. So I'm getting hyped for that this Sunday. I'll be watching some Red Zone, rooting for the Bengals, rooting for the Chiefs, unfortunately, and getting hyped even though my team's not playing. Let me know in the comments section, Broncos country, what you'll be doing and how you'll be celebrating the bye week, resting and relaxing over here and still watching football. Do me a huge favor, also like this video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. That helps me so much with YouTube to continue to grow this platform. And as always, go Broncos.